Got this book in the mail, The Parables of the Kingdom by C.H. Dodd, and I started reading it. Because if I don't start reading the books that I get in the mail, then what will happen is that I will lose that initial excitement that I had about the book, and it will just migrate to the back of my desk and eventually be put onto the shelf. And Hey everybody, welcome to the Sanctus Forum. I am Michael Stewart Robb, better known as Mike, and we are interested in books and everyday spirituality. Now, that everyday spirituality is kind of about spirituality in the concrete, in the lived places of life. And one of the best books for that has been Dallas Willard's The Divine Conspiracy. We have been in the fourth chapter, talking about little bits and pieces all year, and all these bits and pieces have to do with Jesus's teaching of the Beatitudes. And Dallas Willard is trying to make the case that these are teachings about concrete, special cases, people that are standing in front of Jesus, and Jesus is correcting general assumptions and practices through the Beatitudes. And the section for today, don't have your relatives for dinner, Dallas Willard thinks is another example of this kind of teaching through the concrete. And he calls it a striking illustration of this type of teaching. This type of teaching is this idea of correcting general assumptions or practices. And the striking illustration is found in Luke 14. And it is, in this case, Luke 14, Jesus is correcting a general practice. And Jesus has shown up to somebody's house, somebody who's a religious leader, and he's invited all of his best friends, and he's invited his family members. And Jesus uses this real situation in order to correct a general practice that's going on in the towns and the whole nation there of Israel. And that practice is, well, when you throw a party, you invite the people that are going to invite you to their party, and you don't invite the people that can't. And this is what I found so helpful about Dodd's book. Is Dodd is a New Testament scholar, a professor. This book came out in 1935, so it's not a new book, and it obviously also is a used book. This is probably an edition from the 50s or the 60s or something like that. Little classic, and he has a lot to say about the concreteness of the parables in particular. He's arguing against the allegorical interpretation of the parables, which has been the way that the church has generally interpreted Jesus's parables as all allegorical. And not long before Dodd, and certainly by the time Dodd comes around, this idea that, wait a second, I think we've misunderstood what Jesus is doing with a parable. We've misunderstood what a parable is. And a parable is a story that really comes out of the concrete. It's a realistic story. It's something that really only works if you understand the historical, cultural setting in which it was found. And he makes that point here in the first chapter, and with statements like this. What then are parables? They are a natural expression of a mind that sees truth in concrete pictures rather than conceives it in abstractions. And then he says, this concrete pictorial mode of expression. Let's see here. At its simplest, the parable is a metaphor or simile drawn from nature or common life. in the parables of the Gospels, all is true to nature and to life. Each similitude or story is a perfect picture of something that can be observed in the world of our experience. Now, that is exactly what Dallas Willard has been saying about Jesus and Jesus's concrete manner of teaching. And I think there is a direct connection between the two. He quotes Dodd's book, Parables of the Kingdom, multiple times in this, and he's clearly read this book, and when he's talking about the concreteness of Jesus' teaching, I mean, this is what he has in mind. And I think I didn't quite see that the first time around, because I was sort of taught to read the parables this way. I wasn't taught the allegorical way. And so when I hear the Dallas making that argument, I kind of think, well, he just knows what parables are. But it wasn't an easy sell. I mean, for Dodd to make that kind of statement back in his day, he was still having to argue for a particular point. And Dallas is just depending on that kind of thing. So the point of the story, if you're wondering here, the point that Jesus is making in Luke 14, says Dallas, is that the external acts of hospitality aren't really what it's about. I mean, the whole thing is a hyperbole. You obviously can invite your family members. Dallas makes a couple jokes about, like, maybe you've been looking for this verse. But obviously that's not what Jesus has in mind. What he has in mind is that we need to look at what's happening deep down and ask ourselves, are we a generous or hospitable person all the way down? Or are we, with our parties and our social events, are we just creating a little mutual appreciation circle? Yeah, that's Dallas's phrase, a little circle of appreciation, in which, we just pat each other on the backs, and I give you a gift and you give me a gift. And Jesus is sort of saying, hey, isn't that kind of pointless? And doesn't that show that you don't actually care at all about the people who really can't give anything back to you in return? But I think that seeing Dallas reading books like this gives us a glimpse of how he read Scripture. And one of the ways that he read Scripture is he looked for historical information, and he relied on people that did even more historical, grammatical digging than he did, people like C.H. Dodd. And I think that's a very important thing to recognize. Dallas is able to interpret verses like this, Luke 14, because he is relying on a kind of historical understanding of the times and places. He's not just doing a Lectio Divina with Luke 14. He's using the information from the commentaries or from people like Dodd, and letting them inform his way of reading that passage, and then he can bring it home in application or use it to see the heart of God or whatever it is. And if you would like to continue to hear about how Jesus teaches, about Dallas Willard, I mean, after all, you've made it to the end of the video, you should subscribe to this. You should maybe join the newsletter list over at Sanctus Institute and see sort of the behind the scenes side of helping Europe and especially European churches be more theologically and formationally sound. Until next time.